He was a morbidly obese surgeon destined for an operating table and an early death. Now he's a rebel MD who is fabulously fit and fighting to make America healthy again. This is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia.
Hey, welcome, folks. As you heard, this is the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast with Dr. Philip Ovadia. We are joined today by a returning guest who, when we first had him on a couple of 3 years ago, I felt like, woohoo, I'm going to get to talk to Ed Latimore. But then Ed, his visibility kind of exploded. I'd like to think it was our responsibility, but I know it wasn't. And when he showed back up on our list, I got to tell you, I was stoked just because I want to hear what he's been doing the last several years. I want to hear about that. But then I find out he's got this book coming out, and we get an advanced copy of the book, and I start reading it. Ed, wow. And I don't give this kind of praise highly, but the writing itself, ignore the story. The quality of the writing is just gorgeous. It felt so good to read beautiful writing. I hope to God it was you. Beautiful stuff. Ed Latimore, welcome back to Stay Off My Operating Table. I'm now going to back out because this is Phil's show.
Awesome. Hey, I'm here, and it was definitely me. Believe you me, they pay you okay for writing a book, but they don't pay you that much. And here's a little secret about the publishing industry. It's not really a secret to anybody to know. You can definitely hire people to write your book. No problem. They don't care if you can write, at least for nonfiction. They care if you have an audience and a platform. But
Yeah.
I built my audience and platform writing, so I wouldn't just, hand that off. Plus, it was my story. No, I put a lot of energy into that book. And one of the great things about writing, I think a lot of things in life are like this, but writing is where I really got this lesson hammered home, is that the most efficient path is not always the best path for creation. Because just kind of the story of how this book came together. I started writing in about 40,000 words, and I said, this ain't the book they want.
Wow.
So I scrapped that and started writing the book I thought they wanted. And just for some comparison, the book that I started writing was an autobiographical kind of memoir. 40,000 words in it, so I said, this is probably not it.
Wow.
Then I started writing something a little more like thematic, where I would talk about different aspects of like personal development and use my story and then a lot of research behind it. Okay, kind of like a Malcolm Gladwell-esque type book, but for personal development. And then it's time to submit the book. And I have this version that's 50 or 60,000 words. And then I have what I initially wrote. And at the last minute, I said, let me amend this to the front because that'll make a lot of sense. Because the way I wrote the autobiography, it was chronological. And I submitted, and in 2 days, I started getting texts from my editor. This is great. I love this writing. This is awesome. This is really happy what you turned in. This is incredible. And I'm messaging my agent. I'm like, yo, is Noah normally this like this? Does he say this to all the writers? Or is this something special? He's, nah, man, Noah's really excited about what you turned in. This is a good sign. And then crickets
Oh,
for a few weeks. And then we have the meeting where we go over all the feedback and the changes. And let me tell you, sometimes you got to do things wrong to do things right. And there's also a story of self-belief in here too. Pretty much he loved that part that I wrote that I thought was pointless, that I didn't think they wanted. Hated what came next. And he hated it so much that he actually didn't know how to give the criticism because it is two kind of books. But fortunately, one of the things that you have to be able to do when you evaluate anything or question anything or learn something is you have to be able to look at what people are putting forward, what they're saying, the visible thing, and then what that is a representation of. As I was looking at all the feedback, I'm going, okay, you wanted the story of Ed Latimore. You didn't want the analysis of Ed Latimore's life. If he had said that, and then pretty much here's all this markup and everything, but if somebody had told me at the beginning, or the feedback had just had the following lines, if it just said, look, we want the story of Ed Latimore, not the analysis, you're writing a memoir, I'd have been like, oh, shit. But I didn't realize that. But because I did that all that other work, I have some really great content and I got smarter. I learned things that I didn't know because I did all this research and wrote a very different type of book. And that book is like around now. It's a 60,000 word tome. And when I ended up rewriting it, as you'll see, the book is divided into three parts. There's like my life before boxing, my development as an amateur, and is yeah, pretty much my development as an amateur because that is a big deal. And then there's my pro life and after. So in the first version, that middle section doesn't even exist. Like it's not even there. I didn't glossed over it because when you live in the forest, you don't think the trees are that interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, who wants to read about? And then I was like, wait a second, this is a pretty damn unique thing I got to be part of and write about and how it altered my life. And I more or less won the lottery. In fact, when I told that story in the first version, I framed it through, things you can control and things you can't, and contrasted it against my early life. But that middle section is powerful without giving away spoilers. And then I had to rewrite a little at the end. I had to do almost no work on those first five chapters because that's what we were trying to do. I didn't know that though. And then writing the book itself was challenging because babies don't sleep. At least my baby didn't sleep. He was just terrible. And he was born November 2022. I got the contract February 2023. We had to move. We had this great apartment we loved, and the apartments are just not big enough for babies. So we had to move. We had to move, and then he was like, "You know what? I don't know what this whole circadian rhythm thing is, and I don't care to learn it."
Uh,
And
oh my
and
God.
so it was a whole time, but I'm really proud of what I produced. That has eaten up so much of my time. And you know what's crazy? Writing the book really is the easy part.
Hey, Phil's raised kids. I've raised kids. We get it.
Yeah, it's a fun time.
Oh my.
Yeah. The book is called Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business, Boxing and the Art of Life. And I guess, I'm going to, as our audience, the focus of this podcast is health and, things that you can do to improve your health. And I'm sure people are wondering, what one might have to do with the other. And it's a great guy and we love him, but why did we have him back on to discuss this book? And having read the book now, there are many good reasons why, but I'd love to hear, you kind of talk about how you think these lessons that you learned from boxing and from everything that you went through apply to just someone out there who's trying to improve their life. They're not looking to become a successful amateur or pro boxer.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I wrote you about coming on the show, one of the things that I mentioned was, oh, by the way, I'm 40 and I fight this week. I got back in the ring and I won my fight back. That was a great, great event, and it is reaping some of the benefits that I was anticipating. I got the local papers to be there and talk about stuff, and so that's cool. But as far as the specific question, and we can dive into the health stuff even more on that, is what I try and sum up kind of what one can learn from me and writing this book and seeing why people have me come speak or why I work or what I am good at and working with people. The thing that continually seems to come up in different forms is that no matter what your obstacles are, there is a way to handle them. And really, the only reason why people have trouble handling things that seem to be difficult, because many things aren't difficult, they're just not simple. But or rather, they are simple but not easy. So they are somewhat difficult. But you'll see where I'm going with this. Once you identify the problem, you know the solution. You might not want the solution, but you got that's the solution. And I'm sure you see this a lot in your practice. The idea that you can have anything you want, you just can't have everything you want. You can be as healthy as you want to be at any age and optimal and all kinds of things. But you can't do that and drink like a fish and eat garbage and not work out. You pick one. You can't have both. If your idea of a good time is lounging out on after work and watching Netflix and slamming back some beers on the weekend, okay, but you don't get the other stuff. It ain't for you. You're not going to do what it takes. You can't have both lives. All right. That is really just the overarching lesson of everything that I've done and continue to do. I can do anything I want, but I've made peace with I cannot do everything I want. And then from that point, it's just choosing which things I want the most
That's a
and
really good way to
discarding
say
everything
it.
else.
That's a really good way to say it. I gave a speech last month where the core of it was that you get what you want. And I talked about the lesson I learned that way, but the way I expressed it was not as succinct as what you just said, because there are qualifications. I love the
Yeah,
way you said that. You can get, say it again. You said,
you can have anything you want. You just can't have everything you want.
there you go.
And that's a very difficult idea for people to accept. But we accept that with everything else that has a finite restraint. We accept that with money. We accept that in our relationships with people. Maybe not consciously, but everyone settles to some degree because you can't have every quality you want in a person. That person doesn't exist. And if that person does exist, they are in such high demand that you better take a number and get in
I was
line.
going to say, if that person exists, you ain't getting them.
Yeah. So you determine kind of what you want and what you're willing to be like, Now, what I say is once you determine what you want or what qualities or things you accept or whatever, you have to be unyieldingly tenacious about the pursuit of them. Leave this out. And you got to be flexible on everything else. Otherwise, you're going to stress yourself out way too much and you'll
Well,
miss
we'll
the point.
unpack that though. Let's give us specifics. Here you are, 40 years old, getting back into the boxing ring. There is something you said, and I don't remember where in the book you said it, but it was something about people play football, nobody plays boxing.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's not my original quote. That's from there's this movie with Wesley Snipes and Ving Rhames set in prison. And in prison, Ving Rhames is like the boxing champion, and then Wesley goes to jail, but he's the world champ outside. So they set up a boxing match in the prison to settle who's undisputed, which is the name of
oh,
the movie.
okay.
But he's like, what's the difference between you and other athletes? Or it's the other way around. I think maybe Ving Rhames is the champ and Wesley Snipes is in prison. Anybody who knows the movie, I don't want you to hang me. But he says, a reporter asked, I think the movie starts out this way, what's the difference between you and other athletes or something like that? And he goes, nobody you play football, you play baseball, nobody plays boxing, and the way he says it is, it's not a game. You can get in there and get hurt. Like this weekend in the fight, I was never in any real danger, but I was quickly reminded of why my plan for coming back, I was dropping a weight class because the weight class I fought my entire career is heavyweight. For those who don't know, heavyweight is the only weight class where there's no upper limit. There's a lower limit. They won't let you fight if you're 200 pounds. 201, okay, get in there. I'm a small heavyweight. The heaviest I've been was 232, and then as I got stronger and in better shape, I leveled out at 215, 220. That's miniature, and I'm only 6'1". And 6'1" sounds tall, but in a division where the average height, where it's skewed heavily to the left, is 6'4", that's miniature. The guy I fought was shorter than me, but he was 258 pounds. And you might think, oh, that's gonna be like a pudgy dude. Nah, this guy, he wasn't like ripped up, but he was strong. He just wasn't as skilled. So I beat him. But in that, we clinched, and I was like, ah, that's right. I'm not, I mean, I'm strong, but I'm not, but I'm getting into with guys that train. There's difference between being strong against a regular guy. Like I go and put up numbers, and then they're strong, like I do manual labor or I fight. And when and that's muscular coordination if we want to quantify it. How
Yeah.
well do you move your bodies together, you know, to get something, to get an output that's greater than the sum of the parts? And he clinched up with me, and I said, "This guy's no joke." And he hit me with a punch. But then when he hit me with a punch, I got to see, okay, he's not really as coordinated because he hit me with a good overhand right, just out the clinch because I'm not used to dealing with guys shorter. So some of my the things that I've learned to do, I have to do them lower, and I didn't do them lower. I, duck, and he got me right over. I'm still sore from it. This fight's been like 5 days now, and I'm like, okay, this guy can hurt me, but it's boxing. Of course, he can hurt me. Like there's this guy can hurt me. Like I'm gonna walk around, and be dinged up, and then there's this guy could stop me if I'm not paying attention. Yeah, to relate that to that idea of anything, everything, there's like the specific application there. And that, yeah, we got to look for an opponent. And a lot of people don't know this, but athletic commissions do their best to match based on experience. Some commissions are stricter than others, but PA is, and I find PA is one of those commissions that I'd say is stricter than others, especially with Philadelphia, which is a boxing mecca. So they weren't going to let me just fight anyone. We initially, I had a bunch of guys that returned that weren't approved because I've got 15 fights, one loss, this great amateur record. And so the promoter had to go and argue, okay, so there's all that, but the guy hasn't fought in almost 9 years and he's 40. Give us a break here. Like for the next one, you can do whatever you need to do. But this one, for our first fight back, what are we going to do? And so they were like, okay, there we go. We'll let this guy come in. And the guy's 4-11 was his record. But like you can't look at people as in boxing. There's one thing because these guys are the stepping stones and they build fighters up. They're not just because you got a 4-11 record. That don't mean you lost 11 fights. That means now if you got KO'd, that's different. But if you got a few of them as decisions and you were going in the other guy's backyard, they want the guy to win from a marketability standpoint, and you're in the hometown. But that
Yeah.
don't mean them guys can't fight, man. I've been in it with some dangerous individuals who, well, everyone's dangerous, but I mean like dangerous. Like they're the guys they call when they want to make sure a guy's legit. Because if you can't beat this guy, you're not legit. But this guy can hurt you. That's why we use him because we know what he's about. He knows the game. He's not gonna come and ask him for more money. He knows the $4,000 fight. Try and kill this dude. Probably give him some bonus money on the back end if he does knock me out. And that's that. This guy wasn't that caliber, but he was the worst caliber they would let me fight, all things considered. And if I had a fight beforehand, I wouldn't have been able to fight that guy, assuming I won.
Yeah.
But I can come back and decide to fight, but I can't be a heavyweight. That's my limitation. It just wouldn't be worth it. And then in the training going up to the fight, there's a big trade-off here. You only got so many hours in a day. I got my kid now. I didn't have a kid the last time we talked. I didn't have a kid the last time we fought. So now I got a responsibility. Now I'm fortunate in that my wife works from home as well. And my sister has a job to where she can come some days of the week, multiple times, and we have a day babysitter. But all that stuff costs money. And on top of that, it takes time away from doing other things that I need to do, in particular with the book launch, too. So I go, how?
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, wait, this dude wrote a book and decided to train to get back into boxing and have a legitimate professional fight and has a kid?
Yeah, you know how I did it? Because
I'm
I said,
guessing
okay.
drugs. That's the only thing I can
Oh
figure.
man, I wish, man. They piss test you. There ain't no drugs, man. And you know what's crazy? Not that whatever. I mean, I guess so. I guess if I went into the ring coked up, that is an advantage. But it's like a what do you call it? A schedule 10 or class 10 or something like that. Some number 10 panel drug test is one of the tests they give you. That's what it is. But no, the only way I was able to do it, once I decided that I would do this, which was about halfway through writing the first draft, the only way it will work is if I gave myself enough time. For example, I couldn't be in the gym 5 days a week. That just wasn't happening. That wasn't feasible in any universe. But when I got into the gym, I was zoned in. You know, technology's come a long way since the last time I fought. And I had my wireless earbuds in and I was zoned in on my training. And I could only get up there 3 days a week, four maybe, depending on things. But I also, you know, we've been trying to get a fight back. I've been like serious with my intent. I couldn't fight in March. Shit, man. Since November, realistically, is when I've been going to the gym to get ready. That's a long time. That's what, 9 months? I've been in there putting myself through the ringer because I knew I couldn't put myself. Well, first, there's a learning curve in general. I've come back from a layoff. This is now the fourth time I've done it. The other three times were for injury. You know, like I took, you know, when I was an amateur, I took 4 weeks off from my elbow and then as a professor, oh no, 4 weeks off from my elbow and once as an amateur. Then I had a blowout fracture that took 12 weeks to heal after surgery. And then as a professional, I went away for 6 months for my military training. So I know what it's like to come back each time, and each time it's a little harder or a little or less difficult because I know what to expect and I know how to train. But there's but it's never been almost a decade, you know.
Yeah, that's a long way off.
But you know, I'd learned a bit in the meantime. It's not like I was, you know, training the whole time I was away. Really, just 2 years prior to it. 1 year of me, a year and a half of me coaching, learning biomechanics, and really improving things that I didn't know or gaining knowledge I didn't have when I fought before. And then,
What was your health regimen? How did your health regimen change
oh,
from
so this is
being a
great.
guy who writes to being a guy who's training to fight?
You know, I like to
At
think of
40.
myself. I like to think of myself as like a black Nicholas Sparks. I don't know if you know about Nicholas Sparks.
Sadly, I do.
So what a lot of people don't know about Nicholas Sparks is that Nicholas Sparks, I think he's fairly high level. I'm not sure what level, but I think it's Taekwondo that Nicholas Sparks is into.
Did not know that.
Yeah, he's a pretty wow. He's 60 now, well 59. I just was looking him up to see. But yeah, that was his life. You know, you stay in shape, you got to train and all that. So for me, it's not like I'd ever been sitting around just doing nothing, and I never let my body go to crap. So we were always walking, and you know, I had a pretty, I won't say heavy, but probably a bit more consistent than the average person gym routine before my son was born. And I don't drink. And in terms of eating, the wife loves cooking. And the big benefit of that is that all of my meals, even breakfast, they're cooked. It's real food. You know, we're always at farmers markets buying for real food. So my baseline health was great.
Okay, when you say great, 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So quantify what great meant before
All
you
right. So we want to put this in quantifiable terms. You know, blood triglycerides never above 50. It's weird. In fact, I took a test and I didn't realize it was fasting, and my triglycerides came back at 78 right after I ate. So
what's that, Bill?
That's very good. Nice low level of triglycerides.
Okay.
yeah, my fasting glucose has never been a triple digit number. Usually in the 60s to 80s. Body fat percentage probably at the highest 17, like not even 17. Really, 16 or 17. And that's like the highest. I'm trying to think of any other quantifiable blood work measures I can throw out there. My free testosterone is usually a triple digit number, and my total testosterone between 7 and 850 nanograms per deciliter. I'm a healthy guy naturally.
Yeah.
However, you want to talk about, what can you do with knowledge and, apply it. So I started this service, Rebel Health Alliance. They actually ended up helping sponsoring a bit of the fight, but Rebel Health Alliance it's a concierge telehealth service, and they do this in-depth blood work when you come in. And I noticed something that I had seen before, but like I don't talk to my PCP about. This guy gets mad at me when I do my own blood work. I noticed that my reverse T3 was chronically and highly elevated. It was high when I did the test 4 years ago. It was high now. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And my free T3 was low. So the doc said, it looks like you're not tired and everything, you're in shape. You're not having trouble sleeping. Maybe it is hypothyroidism, but let's treat it like that. Let's see if we can get your reverse T3 down and free T3 up. So he put me on 25 micrograms of leothyronine, artificial T3. And let me tell you something. I had been trying to get below 225 for a while. I tried everything. I got guys in the fitness space. I was like, help me. Why am I not dropping the body fat? Turns out though, and I know you almost certainly know what reverse T3 is and T3 and what they do in the body. But for anyone else who doesn't know, or you, Jack, the reverse T3 is the metabolically inert form of T3, and it's the same as T3, just with an iodine switched. Is that correct? And so it fits in all the receptors on the body where T3 would go, and it goes there first. Like it out competes it. I think if that's the right word. So I've got the Skaha T3, reverse T3. So T3 can't do its job. That's the one that's burns fat. Okay. So when we bring this in, and in 2 weeks, I must have dropped almost 10 pounds of fat because my caloric intake, everything was right, but that got fixed. Now you can look at the pictures from the fight. I didn't realize how lean I was because I wasn't doing anything special, especially when I accepted that I wasn't going to fight cruisers. So I wasn't even trying to cut weight. But I'm looking at the picture of me in the fight, and I'm like, wow, I am like ripped, man. Like my coach actually said to me one day, "Yo, man, you ripped up, man. You got veins in your stomach." I was like, I didn't realize it, but how I had been eating, how I'd been training was all that work. It was like trying to dry the car with your foot on the brake because my reverse T3 was so high that nothing can happen. Once we fixed that, gold. And then on top of that, I started taking selenium every day because in my genetic test, they run the genetic test too. And obviously, genotype does not guarantee phenotype. It indicated that I likely have a thyroid issue. It also recognized I probably have rheumatoid arthritis, which I got a test in the army, and they were like, "Oh, by the way, you have rheumatoid arthritis." I was like, "What?" I feel fine. I was like, you feel fine now. You might not feel so fine later. It's in your blood, so good luck with that. Anyhow, they recognized it, and and it turns out I am almost certainly like deficient in selenium and needed to get that. Selenium is very good for the thyroid. But taking 200 micrograms of selenium every day and 25 micrograms of leothyronine has really changed my body composition and my energy levels. The other thing I detected too in terms of health. So I had asthma as a kid, and it, for the most part, I thought went away. I check my blood work like 4 times a year, and I'm looking at my blood CO2 slowly creep up, and then it reaches that part on the blood test where it goes, warning. There's like it depends on the test you get, but it's like red or whatever. And I start looking this up, And it's all, yo, man, COPD. I'm like, I don't have COPD. I can run like a deer, right? But this is when I found out my doctor really hated me doing my own blood work. Because I took it to him and I was like, yo, I scheduled an appointment. I was like, I don't know what this means, but I know it's not good. And he's like, how did you get this? I'm like, got a blood test, man. He's like, who prescribed it? I just paid for the line, man. Where are you? You're like a dinosaur. They don't do that. And he begrudgingly, after trying to scold me like I'm some type of kid that they broke into the liquor cabinet, he he wrote a script and got me to pulmonologist who was much more forgiving and much more understanding and much more supportive. We did an arterial blood gas and a pulmonary function test, and it was like, oh, your asthma's back. Here, take this daily. See you in 6 months. It was like, again, it's like I was training my whole career with a half a lung. Now it's back. So those are two big health things. So getting the thyroid fixed, getting my lungs taken care of, and then in general, just taking care of myself.
This is
Uh,
fascinating because you're talking about a guy who was already in the top 12% in terms of health and still dealing with some
you can, you
not
know,
so
like,
easy to identify issues.
yeah, definitely not so easy because, and Doc, chime in here if I get this incorrect, but the typical thyroid panel that your doctor's going to give you is only going to test for TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone. It's not going to go into your free T3, your T3, your T4. You're not going to see the antibodies, TICO, I think, but
TPO, yeah.
TPO, right? It's not going to go into any of that. And that's, you need that information because, as I understand it, the way I learned this and put it in my brain is that a lot of the systems in your body, they're just like a thermostat. And if you only look at the setting on the thermostat, all you'll see is the thermostat is working. You won't know if it is working to keep your house hot or cold. You'll just know that it's on. Like, for example, this winter, on one of the coldest days, like record cold days of the year, our furnace went out. And we had to get like an emergency person in there because the house and the temperature in the house was dropping. But the thermostat was still working. It was still trying to kick that heat out, but it wasn't doing anything. It's like why you have to get fasting insulin and fasting glucose tested, because if your glucose is even, even if it can look normal, it should look normal. That's what the insulin does. But if your insulin's sky high, that means you're probably bringing in too much sugar. It's the same way with your thyroid. Your thyroid stimulating hormone can look perfectly okay. But if you don't look at the other stuff, you don't know if anything else is going on. If it's functioning well, but you're having a conversion issue or a receptor site issue, all of these things can be affecting you. So you got to look at the other stuff. And fortunately, I treat my body as, this was not, I won't say before boxing, but this was definitely like post sobriety. I treat my body like it is the most important asset, because if I lose this, then I lose everything. It's like it goes my body, my family, and everything else after that is to support those two goals. And what that's done is that's built in this curiosity for knowledge and ways to optimize. So I didn't even buy into the idea that 40 was too old. If for no other reason, I saw there are other guys competing at the top in the sport who were 40.
George Foreman was what,
45.
45 when he won it?
Yeah, Bernard Hopkins broke the record at 48. And then he won at 46 and he defended a few times at 40 until he was 48. You can do it, but one of the things that Bernard Hopkins says is you got to take care of your body. You cannot run this thing into the ground, because the reality is you are still aging. No matter how good I feel, no matter how strong I am, no matter what my numbers look like, I'm still aging. Okay. But do I got to age like everyone else, or do I get to be a 40-year-old walking around with an accidental six-pack? That definitely wasn't the goal. I just was trying to be healthy and strong and eat well.
Oh, there's the title of your next book. Accidental Six-Pack.
The accidental six-pack. I love it. What was your motivation this time around? I mean, you talk about in the book, right, that you originally started boxing to survive, essentially, and to get you out of the upbringing and everything in your background. And you talked about how you initially were going to try and be a football player, but that didn't work out, and so you got into boxing. But now here you are, you're pretty successful, you're comfortable, you got a family. What motivated you to get back in the ring?
Oh man, there are a few reasons. I write essays about these kind of things because people ask the question, and then I want to make sure my thoughts are clear. So I actually wrote an essay a while ago about like why I quit boxing with only one loss, because it wasn't just one reason. And then when I had this idea for this, I had to sit down and eventually write an essay why I'm fighting again. And it's a combination of a few things. I guess we'll just quickly run through them. And I want to be clear here. If it was just one or two, maybe three, but definitely just one or two, it's not enough to go through what it takes to fight or go through a fight. So it wasn't just one thing by itself. It's just not. Fighting sucks. And I know what I'm doing, and I have resources, more resources than I had before, and it still sucks. Number one, I have a book coming out that focuses on the role that boxing played in my life. And because I learned so much over the past 10 years about how pretty much influence is built, and I got to see what happened with my first self-published book, and I wasn't even fighting. I said, it only makes sense for me to box again. I had to, when you put together a book proposal for a publisher, you look at comparable titles. I didn't know why. I mean, I read it to make sure to get some idea, but the best comparable title was David Goggins. It Can't Hurt Me. And one of the things that made David's book so successful, in my opinion, I mean, aside from getting on Rogan, is that he kept running. He kept living the life that he was talking about in the book. And it just made a compelling story. So that's number one, is I understand the power of marketing. That by itself, though, that is not gonna get me back in the ring with guys freaking 30, 35 pounds heavier than me. Number two, I identified those health issues. That stuff what didn't come about while I was training, it came about before, and I said, okay, if I could do all that and I was not as healthy, what can I do with everything firing on all cylinders? And I really wanted to test that out. That is related to the next point, which is during my 8.5 year hiatus, near the later end, I started coaching at a little gym part time. But everything I taught, I wanted to make sure it was sound and it stood up to scrutiny. What you learned in boxing, though, is way more cult like and superstitious than a science. Like the other sports, because so much money and research is involved, if it doesn't work, it doesn't last, or you don't last. You can keep thinking it, you won't have a job. But it's not boxing. Literally anybody can throw a towel over their shoulder and become a trainer. It's kind of
And call themselves a trainer.
yeah. But as I was doing that, we'll stop there on this point and jump to another one. My coach calls me up and asks me to come on a video with him to explain why you don't pivot your foot when you throw a hook. It's a big debate in boxing. The answer is clear as day. All someone has to do is study biomechanics and really research and look at things. I'm reaching to show you something. But so I made sure he thought it was a physics question. It was a biomechanics question. Of course, being a physicist, I know how to learn and read studies. So I went and picked up the fundamentals of biomechanics. This is not a small book. And really dug in and started to look at like how we move and how athletes should move optimally. Plus, I started looking at the fighters who were very good at things and did things correctly that I could see. And I'm putting all this together, this research, the studying of fighters, working at things on my own. And I said, you know what? I know something that they don't know. And what it really is, I know something a few people know. And the few people who know it go on to become great fighters. They look like they're from another planet. A good example of it right now is Terrence Crawford. You go back to the Four Kings era with Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, and Tommy Hearns. All those guys, they had it. Actually, a lot of the old guys had it before boxing got co-opted by a bunch of, ironically enough, sports and conditioning people, because when everybody's got to make their dollar. But I realized that if I can learn to do what I'm looking at, and I have a blueprint for it now because I went and studied it, found a bunch of research. But by the way, boxing is just like any other sport with a rotational aspect. And so while there's not a lot of research on punching, there's some. There's a shit ton of research on ball, on batter swings, pitchers, tennis, and
That's what you mean by the rotational.
yeah, more specifically, when you rotate through where the axis is down the transverse plane. So when you're, what is that? When you're spinning across the Y plane with your, with the pivot point or the point of rotation being across the XYZ plane. That's what I mean. Yeah, figured that out. And then because I figured that out, I get in training and my coach is, he says he's amazed. At first he was pushing me away, and then and my coach is a very good coach, Hall of Fame coach. And he's watching me take what he's giving me and apply it way faster than before. And I actually forget faster than before. I couldn't before because I didn't understand what I was trying to do in terms of what muscles to tense, how to coordinate, what to use. But I get that now. And so I want to test that and really put that and see how far I can go with it. And then the last reason,
Walk the talk.
yeah, I'm not going to argue with a bunch of guys in coaching who don't even know what they're arguing. If I can't talk to you, but if you can't tell me what the stretch shortening cycle is, you don't have any business talking to me about the biomechanics of punching and how to throw a punch. There are guys who still believe that you can't develop your chin, or that punchers are made, or punches are born, not made. They believe this. And any experience in any other sport will tell you you can improve all of this. You just don't understand what a chin is. You think it's one's resistance to a punch naturally, when the reality is it's making sure that it starts in your feet. And if both of your feet are grounded, you can direct that energy through a ground, kind of like an electrical circuit. So you take that punch on the chin, and if you have your feet grounded the way they should be, if you're going to throw a good punch, it all works together. Then yeah, all of a sudden you're not going to be punched. People are like, oh, Gennady Golovkin, Triple G, has this great chin. Marvin Hagler has this great chin. Very few people have put together the reason they have a great chin is because they also know how to punch, and they know how to punch. Their feet are grounded. Their feet are grounded and the steps are small, and they never move beyond the average of their center of gravity. It's really fascinating stuff. And I know for a fact that I'm one of the only people talking about it this way. And I want to see if I can apply it. I don't want to argue if it works, and I want to go try it out. And then the last reason why I'm coming back is I should have been a cruiserweight the entire time. I should
Wow.
be a smaller fighter. I did this fight at heavyweight because I had so much stuff going on that I didn't want to have the added stress of trying to make weight for the first time in my career. That would have been the first time. But for the next fight, I will. I'll make the
There's
weight.
going to be a next fight.
Oh, for sure. This sport takes too much energy and effort for me to come in for a one-off. I didn't even get the biggest benefit from it.
Which
There's so
is
the greatest benefit will be ending up, if I can measure this out objectively, to end up on a show on like the Zone or on a Jake Paul undercard. Because what I'm trying to do is take the visibility that I know I can gain and just funnel it to more profitable ventures. Like my goal now, coming up over the next year, once the book is published, is I'm going all in on speaking, because I've already been paid to speak. It's all been internal, but I'm going to do outreach and really put together and polish up my site, my deck, and my presentation. I've got a few speeches already lined up, and I'm just going to knock those out the park and really do great. Hopefully, get some good film and testimonials, and just keep shopping myself, because I look at the gap in that market. I won't say gap, because I'm not so arrogant to think that there's no one as cool as me. I mean, there are a few people, but they exist. But I know that I can serve and speak to an audience that is in a very unique manner. Probably not a lot of boxers with my background and my story who can articulate it well enough. to get up there and you can go, okay, this guy will work for me. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I got to imagine that the number of boxers with physics degrees who grew up in the projects is a pretty small number there.
And and I look at what people pay me to talk about and what my agent saw when he signed me. There are so many funny little happenstances with the book, but my agent, so I didn't go the normal route. Like you query an agent, and then that
I'm
agent queries a
shocked.
publisher.
Shocked, Ed.
What ended up happening for me is I was talking to a bunch of people when I decided to write a book. One guy says, that sounds like a great idea. Let me introduce you to my agent. I get an email and I'm like, this guy's not talking to me like an agent. I look down and that's because he's not an agent. He's actually the acquiring editor over at Portfolio in Penguin. I talked to him. They're like, this is great. We want to bring you on, but you need an agent. Let me introduce you to a guy I think will work with you. He introduces me to Howard Yoon of Ross Yoon Agency. And then Howard is great. He's like, all right, let's work together. And then he disappears after he signed the contract. I'm like, this motherfucker, like, he's just gone. I'm like, and then he shows up 5, 6 months later. He sends me an email. He's, hey, I know I've been off the radar for a little bit, but I've been working on this. And there's a link. And he goes, don't worry about what this means. It's a good thing. You're still with me. It's no big deal. I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? I click on it, and it's Ross June acquired by William Morris Endeavor. And I had never heard of William Morris Endeavor, but I knew I don't want to say never heard, but I knew roughly what they were. So I messaged my buddies out in Hollywood. I'm like, hey, you guys ever heard of WME? They're like, fuck you mean we ever heard of WME? We're trying, I should know what they are. I'm like, well, I think I'm represented by WME now. He's like, yeah, that's what that means because now all the emails come from, Howard Yoon at WMEagency.com. And Howard knew this. He, none of the publishers knew it. Like, Noah didn't know it when they introduced me. But Howard looked at everything I had to offer and he thought I was a worthwhile investment to bring along, knowing that his agency was about to be merged with WME. And so that gives me a lot of faith in my ability to tell a story that can help people. So that's kind of the goal here. And it's just a really cool icing on the cake that I'm living what I'm writing about.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Tell us about the book. Give us the final bits, and we're going to wrap it up. I can just say I cannot wait to finish it. I'm thinking I'm about halfway through, and it's just.
Oh, man. What part are you at?
You just won the Pennsylvania Golden Gloves.
Oh, yeah. Now we jump into Los Angeles and that adventure. It's really cool time of my life. I'm really grateful. You ever see The Last Samurai?
God, I guess I'm going to have to see The Last Samurai. I can't tell you how people have said to me, oh, go see The Last Samurai. Okay.
Great movie, but he's got this line in the book or in the movie. I won't spoil how he comes to this line. But he says, Tom Cruise's character, Captain Ogren, he goes, I don't pretend to understand the course of my life. I just know that I'm grateful to have taken a part of it and to taken part in it, even if only for a moment. And I'm just like, that's how I feel about a lot of the things that have happened. I don't understand this life. I know the steps that I've taken, but it's so just awesome. And there have been a lot of awesome things that have happened. But as far as what the book is about, the book is a memoir, and the memoir is about my life restrained to when I stopped boxing the first time. So it tells the story of my upbringing and that world, and then the projects, poverty in the schools, and then change in schools and what that did for my psychology and how I eventually got into boxing. And then my career as an amateur, which is really cool. I just think it's cool looking. Like, it's one of the few things where I can go, wow, I was in that forest and that's cool. I think the outcome of my amateur career was really cool. And then through my professional career and the things I learned and going back to school and throughout there, you get to see me, struggle with the alcohol and how I figured out how to deal with that. And also with, burning the candle at both ends. A lot of the lessons I learned, the way I structured the book, I'm really proud of this, is I couldn't figure out how to structure the book at all initially, even once I realized I was writing a memoir, or I thought I was. But then I was like, let's title these as the lessons, the idea that is being presented in the section. And then you see that you read through the chapter's got a section, and then
Yep.
each subject section has, and most of those are just quotes from my tweets or my tweets that I just grabbed and threw in.
All righty.
Yeah,
He's Ed
awesome.
Latimore. The book is Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business. Just, I'm not getting paid to say this. I loved the writing. The story, frankly, is if somebody pitched this as a fictional movie, I wouldn't believe it. Just doesn't sound real. So it's pretty cool. It lands, when's the publication date?
August 5th. So we are close. We're close. What are we? 2 and almost 3 weeks. Like 19 days if my math is right.
If you're listening to this now, you can pick it up. And I'm guessing it's all the places.
It is everywhere. The publishers do some things great. I won't get into this, but I'll just say publishers don't do everything great. But some things they do extremely well. And one of those things is distribution. Somebody sent me a receipt the other day. They pre-ordered from Target. Target!
There you go.
Awesome. Definitely go check that out. And I'll also say, if you're not already following Ed on social media, that's worth the follow. He's one of the ones at the top of my list I look to check out every day. And like I said, he may not be talking about health. Sometimes he does, but most of the time he's not. But it's still just applicable to everything you're trying to improve in your life. Thanks for the book, Ed, and thanks for the content. And look forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, hey, thank you again for having me on. I know I'm not your typical guest, and I tried to sprinkle some health insights in there from my own journey, but I appreciate you. I never take it lightly when someone lets me on their platform.
It's been good. Y'all go get his book. I promise you'll love it. I promise. All Ed's contact information will be available in the show notes. Just drop down there. This has been Staff from Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Chances are you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't need to change your life and get healthier. So take action right now. Book a call with Dr. Ovadia's team. One small step in the right direction is all it takes to get started. Contact us at ifixhearts.com/talk. That's ifixhearts.com/talk.